Okay. So first question I can see is from Robert, and you're asking what book and film is studied on the course. So we study the film Intouchable, and the book L'étranger in the second year. Okay. Next question. So for a native speaker, how much more challenging will A-level French be than GCSE French? Okay, well, I'll start on that one. So native speakers tend to find A-level challenging in a number of ways. One of them will be that they need to up their level of accuracy, but also the register of their language. So they need to be speaking in a much more formal register and writing accurately in that register too. They need to, so that involves a level of grammatical knowledge that they probably haven't had to deal with at GCSE. I would say that the other challenge for native speakers at A-level is that there's a great deal of knowledge of society and cultural knowledge required. So that involves actually learning facts, which they will have to, and also some quite specific vocab, which they won't have come across in their day-to-day life as a native French speaker, very likely. Okay. Next question. Do come back with follow-up questions if you want to know a little bit more. Next question. Will there be a French trip, and where, and which year? So at this stage, we're sort of I'm in the process of looking at setting up a trip for the wider skills week, which is the very last week of term for the first years. Watch this space. We haven't decided where it's going to be yet. It all depends on getting approval and getting the numbers of students. So, but it's in the planning stage. Okay, Claudia, I'm going to direct this to Daniel, but she says, "What about Spanish?" Claudia, do you mind writing what about Spanish exactly it is that you'd like to know? While you're doing that, I'll answer Robert's question about the average size of a French class. We've got at the moment between 15 and 19 in our French groups. So we've got some quite healthy sized groups, quite nice for good discussions, plenty of sort of very good native speakers and very good non-native speakers as well. Right, there's a question for Justine about German. Are there any German trips, and what's involved in the German course?
Okay, so at the moment we have not enough to do not enough people to do a trip. So if we've only got 11 or 10 students, and this it would be far too expensive to do it. So that's a real well, it's a real shame. But it's also, it would just be too expensive to do that. What was the question? Second one?
The second question is from Freya and says, what's involved in the German course?
Okay, so it's we're doing the same topics as all of the other subjects, and we have a number of topics which start with the environment, which is they've done at home at GCSE. So they start with a topic that is something very something they already know, and then there's the topics were like music festivals, and we also do a film study, which is Das Leben der anderen, which is fantastic. And they really like it because it's a lot about the DDR and spies and things. And that comes up again a little bit on the top topic in the DDR as well. So Vicky, do you want to put something on there? You can just You can just write some stuff in there and maybe say what you think about the content in German.
I've got a question. While that's happening, Claudia's question for Daniel is about Spanish. So the things that I talked about with French, class size, whether there's a trip, CV. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but so class sizes, French, and the trip in for the Spanish perspective, Dan.
Yes. So class sizes in the first year we've got anything between 10 and 15, depending on any year really. This year we've got all three groups are around 10, 12, something like that. Then we collapse one of them into either two. So for the second year, we've got two groups and we've got around 15 in each, more or less. At the minute, we don't have a trip in Spanish. After the pandemics, I haven't got around to see whether I can organize one. And then there was one question a little bit here about one-to-one Spanish, one-to-one speaking lessons. In all three languages, we've got an assistant, and they work with the students in small groups, 4 or 5 people, typically half hour a week. Coming up to the exam, we normally organize a little bit of an intensive practice, sometimes one-to-one, but normally they are in small groups.
I'm just going to pick up on a question that came up earlier that's a sort of general question. Can you start a new language and do you do work experience? So number one, you can't start a new language at A level. We do need you to have done GCSE in the language that you're doing at A level. And the second thing about work experience, what I can say is that the French trip did involve work experience in Toulouse. That's normally the basis of the French trip that we organise. So that is one way in which you can do work experience. Previous years, we've had students also doing work experience with Spanish, the Spanish Embassy, I think, and also working as tutors on a TEFL course for Spanish students. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan. So that's the question about work experience. Okay, I can see that we've got a few questions that have popped up since then. How many can you give us? Okay, so can you give stats on what proportion A star and A star to Bs were awarded for Spanish and German this year? I think Dan's put the Spanish results on the chat, and I think we've got German coming up. Next from Robert Shaw, how many classes are there per week? We have 4 hours. With every subject it's the same actually. We have 4 hours, or actually 4 lessons of 1 hour and 5 minutes per week. You'll also in languages have a half lesson in a small group with the native speaker language assistant. Question from Lucy says, why does it go up, Spanish class sizes? Question for Dan. Lucy says, why does it go up, Spanish class sizes?
Say that again, sorry.
So I've got a maybe Lucy, if you can explain your question, if maybe you want to just clarify your question. I think, are you asking about the sizes of various of the classes between the different languages or from one year to the next? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that question. If you would, if you can just clarify in the chat, we can come back to you. Spanish trip we've talked about. So next there's a question, how in depth do we go into the film study? Oh, I think I can answer that for all the languages, if that's okay. So we study the film in order to write an essay of about 350 to 450 words in the exam. So we look at we look at the film in order to be able to analyze it and write an essay about it in the foreign language. That means we discuss it. We learn a lot of vocabulary and grammatical structures for analyzing a film or a literary text in the foreign language. We'll be looking at techniques, camera techniques, all the other elements that make up the film, such as lighting, cinematography, music and sound, script, performance, all the aspects that you can think of, because the questions can be on anything really, character. So I mean, I think the students mostly find that's one of the lessons that they enjoy the most in languages, actually, is discussing and talking about the film.
Definitely, yeah.
So next question I can see is from Tinuka. What's your approach to learning vocabulary in French? Are they given a long list from day one which has to be learnt? So we do give vocabulary lists in French, but for A level, we do not have a set vocabulary. The vocabulary can literally be anything to do with the topic that we're studying, plus obviously all the high frequency words, connectives, grammatical, linking words, everything else that you need in order to express yourself clearly and logically. So whilst we do give vocab lists, the expectation, I think, from all of us is that students are prepared to note down vocab that as it comes up in readings and listenings, make use of it, note it down, learn it, and any vocab that might come up in a class discussion that may well not be on the list would also be expected to be learned, because we don't know what vocabulary the board will use when it's setting its reading, listening, and speaking questions, especially the translations also. I'm just scrolling down through. There's a question about the Spanish trip, which has already been answered. That's the Spanish trip that's yet to be determined. I've got one from Harish here, which says, is French A-level really hard? I don't think French A-level is harder than any other A-level. It involves lots of different skills.
And this is the case for all of them, yeah.
It's the case for all of them, and they all require hard work. And if you work hard, you can do well at all of them. So you don't have to be a native speaker to do well. In fact, usually, very often, the native speakers find that the non-native speakers do just as well as them, and even better at them, better than them when we come to the A levels. So it's really like any A level. You have to commit to it, and you have to be prepared to work hard. But if you do work hard, you will do well.
And if I can then add to that, is it's all about doing little bits all of the time, rather than sort of doing stuff at the last minute. So 15 minutes each day in the week, you're going to get a huge amount out of that. Probably better than doing something for an hour.
Okay, just moving on. The next one, Philippe Roland has asked for a results table for French. If you scroll back in the chat, you'll see that there's a results table for French right at the beginning. Okay, I can perhaps copy it on again in a minute, but if you scroll back, you'll see that it's there. Okay, I can see that Justine's answered in the chat. Let's see if we've got any other. There's a guest asking, do you offer Spanish AS level, Dan?
No, at the moment, all languages are linear, and we do 2-year courses.
Okay, so there we are. That's the way it is for all three languages. And in fact, the boards have now, most of the exam boards have withdrawn the language AS exam, so it's not possible to do them in very many places at all. Next
Can I just
question.
ask, there's a question here from Freya about the average class in German.
Yeah.
So at the moment in the 6-2, so that is how is it there? so 13 in the second year, and there are 7 in the first year. And so, those are really good. They're really good sizes. A lot of the schools that do languages and do German, they might just have one person there, which was hideous for a language. So they're small, but they're viable, and they're always very lively, and also fiercely proud of doing German. It's a cult, I think.
Okay, just working through these questions as they're popping up. There's a question for Dan about text. What text do you study for Spanish?
The text we studied is La Casa de Bernarda Alba in the second year. In the first year, we watched the film and we studied the film La Lengua de las Mariposas.
Okay, and is the teacher native speaker? As you can probably hear, he is.
Very much so.
Second, next question from Claudia. Do we study culture, history, geography in Spanish?
Yes, we do.
That's all part of the various topics that that are involved. Oh, hi, Lara. Lara's on there as well. Lara is able to answer. Lara is one of our 6-2 students taking A levels this year in both French and Spanish. Hi, Lara. Absolutely. So if you have questions for her, and you're online as well. So I'll direct any to you that are about the student experience, if that's all right. Okay, there's a question here for Steve, from Steve Cox, saying, could you briefly outline the Spanish course I just joined because biology and chemistry ran over? I'm wondering if at this stage it might just be sensible for you to look at the course information sheet.
Yeah, I've done
on
that.
The portal.
I put the link to the portal.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Okay, I'm just scrolling through. So Anna asks, is a film study essentially the way English essays are structured? I guess this could apply to all of the languages. And Lara, would you have an opinion on that?
I would say not necessarily. It's not as much in depth as an English essay would be, but you do have the same structure of like an introduction, some points, and a conclusion. But you don't have to be the best at writing English essays to write a language essay. You're not expected to have the same abilities, but it does have the same kind of aspects of point, evidence, explanation. It's that kind of idea.
And also I think all of us do provide a very, very kind of clear structure that in order to support the students to make their points effectively and show analysis and show all the elements of the essay that they need in order to score the points in the exam. And so it's so it is something. There are definitely similarities with the way English structures it, but in 350 to 450 words equally, you have to be just a little bit more direct. Okay. Charlie asks, if you do German, what grade would you need to do A-level German? Justine.
I've just put on the chat there is a 6 at GCSE.
And that's the same with all the languages. So you have to get a 6 at GCSE and a 4 in English language equally in order to study at A level. So Gabriella asks, is it difficult moving from AQA at GCSE to EdXL at A level? I don't think it makes a difference. Anyone have any other opinions on that?
It doesn't make a difference whether you did
difference.
AQA or EdXL.
No.
These days, the A levels in AQA and EdXL are very similar. There is slight differences in the order in which the topics are taught, a slight difference in some things, but really won't make a difference.
Yeah.
No. Okay, that's not something you need to worry about at all. Okay, next one. Justine, is any German work experience offered?
No, unfortunately. Now Victoria has said here that you have the opportunity to ask teachers to help you to organize that. But it's again because there are so few students, we can't do a trip for that. However, we can actually advise companies that do that,
I was
and that
just
can
going to
be,
say that. Yeah,
yeah,
we have links with a company that we've worked with for work experience trips for France, and also students can book onto independently, and a number of them have had very interesting and successful
yeah.
experiences with that. So we can always help to support you to do that as well.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Right. How long are the German exams? Dan, I can see you're busy answering that one. So all the language exams are exactly the same format. So you've got 3 papers. Paper 1 and 2 are written papers. Paper 3 is the speaking exam. And Dan's put the exact lengths. Paper 1 is listening, reading and translation into English. Paper 2 will be 2 essays about the book and the film. Anna, what percentage does the film study add to our grade? Okay, so the film study will form the basis of one of the essays on paper 2. And if we can do the calculations, it
Well done,
adds
Dan.
up to Dan is 12.5%. Thank you very much. There we are. Okay, can I copy the French table on again? Yes, I can. Okay. Those are the French results. So we've got 11% A stars, A, 44% A, 28% B, and 17% C, and nothing below a C last year. Okay, we've got just literally, I think maybe 2 or 3 more minutes left in this session. So any last final questions? German results table, I think there will be. I'm going to direct Claudia's question to Lara, who's that's a great one for her to answer. Do you learn about Latin American languages and culture?
Yes, you do. Not all of the study is just of Spain, but it also broadens up specifically in the second year. You learn more about South America and the more Spanish speaking world. So it's not just direct. Some bits are directed specifically to Spain, but there are a lot of topics specifically like festivals and stuff like that that you learn about South America too.
Okay, yeah, and I can see Dan's just put the Spanish results on again. If anybody can't scroll back to where they were, they're all the results tables. Oh, good question. What other A levels complement French? Well, definitely other languages are really good. We really, if you're considering, if you're doing 2 languages at GCSE, it's certainly something you consider. They really do help each other. But there are many other A levels that complement French. English literature is helpful, so sociology. We do have many students, actually surprising numbers of students who do French alongside sciences and maths. Lara, for example, is doing French and Spanish and biology and chemistry. Is that right?
Yeah.
So when we've got a number of students who do that, a language basically strengthens your application to any course. Any university course will be strengthened by having a language. It's seen as a very high caliber A level that's impressive. Whatever you study it alongside. But those who, we could, it's really very difficult. So has anyone else got any sort of good ideas? I would say even drama is brilliant to go alongside languages.
Oh, yeah,
Really helps with the
definitely.
performance side of it. Okay. How different? I'm just very finally. How different is the GCSE and A level final exams? Okay, they are pretty different, I would say. In a nutshell, in the GCSE, what you're doing, there's a great deal of rote learning and there's a lot of talking about yourself. In the A-level, you've got to be prepared to be a little bit more flexible, to be able to come up with facts and knowledge about society, and also to be able to react and form sentences and language yourself by reacting to the stimulus. Anyone got anything else they want to add to that?
No. But I'd like to pick up on this question at the end where it says if you're a semi-native speaker on the language, would universities look different? Back in the day, I heard those things, but I don't think they're allowed to do it now because the name doesn't tell the whole story. You can have an English and Spanish sounding name and not doing any Spanish, or you can have any sort of name and that doesn't mean you do. But I cannot speak for all universities. I know that back in the day, 10 years ago, I had one person that told me that, but I don't think they do it anymore.
Yeah, I don't. There's not something I've heard recently as well, and I think that's something it is something that at our level we haven't come across that, honestly. We have a lot of our students who do go on to do a language related course at university, and whether they're native speaker or non-native speaker, it doesn't seem to make any difference whatsoever. Yeah, that's a great answer from Victoria in the chat about the difference between GCSE and A-level. Okay, what would you say about that, Lara?
I just put my answer in the chat, but
Oh,
I would say
fantastic.
not necessarily. As someone who speaks Spanish at home, it hasn't been any problems with any of my applications having done Spanish A-level. As I said, as long as it's not the center of your personal statement saying like, oh, I already speak this language at home, so I just did the A-level, you should be fine. You won't get discriminated against if you do this language and you already speak it at home, so you should be fine.
Okay, so I think that we need to wind up this session now. I'm sure some of you may have other sessions to go on to. I think for any questions that you have that may not have been answered, do send emails to the admissions email, and they may well forward them on to us if it's something that they can't answer themselves. Thank you very much for coming and joining us this evening. It's been really lovely to speak to so many prospective students and answer so many interesting questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a very good evening.
Bye.
And thanks, students, so much.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky.